Thank you, Summer. It is 7:06 p.m. Today's June 11th, 2019. We are now starting our regular City Council meeting. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agenda item 4.1, approval of minutes. Minutes May 23rd, 2019. Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Karen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Reports, starting with me. I had such a great week 2 weeks ago because I was honored to host a couple of really influential people to Moab. The first that I'll talk about is Vicki Varela. So she is responsible for the Mighty Five campaign. She is in GOED, Governor's Office of Economic Development. She is the director of the Office of Tourism. So not only did I have the opportunity to sit and talk with her individually and continue the conversation that we had already had about the local feelings of feeling that we are seeing the advertising dollars spent where they might otherwise be spent on infrastructure. The feeling of being overwhelmed by all of the advertising and marketing. So it was a very good conversation. And as reported in the paper, but also said to me in our meeting, she's very sensitive to that. She apologized for the Mighty Five campaign, and I said, we're not angry about that campaign. We just need to get organized and deal with the unintended consequences. And so it was really great to meet with her. Then we met with Council Member Chair Evan Clapper and me and Vicki, and then we invited Elaine Gisler to that meeting as well. And so we continued that conversation, and we were very frank, but also we're all on the same page, that it's our time to shift how we've been marketing and Moab, what Moab has become as a result of that. I will say that Elaine is looking at the next marketing campaign being a local marketing campaign. The phrase is "do it like a local." Hold on, before you get nervous, let me explain. Because what it will do is highlight our local scientists and recreationists and give them a voice to our visitors and say, doing it like a local is staying on the trail. Doing it like a local is recycling. So it's a way to use marketing dollars to better promote visitor responsibility. I'm very excited about that. And then she was able to participate because she was here in the next person that I was very honored to invite and welcome to Moab. So our representative, our federal House representative, John Curtis, was here. And and she was here for that meeting, which was really great because it just continued the conversation of tourism, marketing, advertising, and actually he was here to talk about clean air. And so we were surrounded, I invited a bunch of scientists to come and talk about clean air. So we were surrounded by the scientists, and Vicki's hearing all the scientists talk about the research and the data and all of the impacts on our on our natural landscape. And so it was really great to have that sort of synergy for Vicki to hear, but then also for our representative to hear. He biked here, but took lots of transportation modes to get here, from public transportation to walking to a Prius and a Tesla. And so it was very highlighted how tricky it is to get to Moab with public transportation. But it was great to have him here, and the article in the paper was really good at describing what was discussed as well. But it was just such a pleasure to host both Vicki Varela and Representative John Curtis. And then I took Vicki on the river. And so as we were floating down the Daly, we talked even more about the impacts of and the unintended consequences of tourism. So that was really exciting. I also was able to talk to Tom Adams. So in the same Governor's Office of Economic Development, where there's the Office of Tourism, there's also the Office of Recreation, and Tom is in charge of that office. And I wanted to give you a date, save the date. I think I emailed it all to you, but October 22nd to 24th is the Outdoor Summit, where I think that there will be a lot of really important conversations that we have about impact mitigation that I think we all need to consider attending. I am lucky enough to be asked to serve on a panel to talk about diversity and access, and be the moderator for that. So that's very exciting, which means I get to go for free. Also, the city doesn't have to pay. Tom Adams is definitely a partner with us in that effort as well. And another save the date, July 20th, the Tax Task Force is coming to Moab. It's a Saturday. I will actually not be in town, so I'm hoping all of you will, the rest of you will be. But our state legislators are coming down to talk. And I've been up to the Capitol and talking to a lot of different people, and as a member of the League of Cities and Towns, I've been talking to different people. So it'll be really great for you all to participate in that if you're here, and just continue to message to the state legislature that a change in the sales tax percentage or distribution could greatly and negatively impact us as a resort community. And then finally, one more date, save the date, July 4th. So the Chamber is definitely reaching out to Chamber members or potential members to get people to booth up and celebrate the 4th of July. So I am very excited to be the city partnering with the Chamber to be bringing that event back. And that's all from me.
Okay. I just noticed when I was putting that on my calendar, October 22nd to 24th, I think will fall on our October 22nd council meeting. So maybe as we get closer, we can figure out how many people are attending.
Oh, and maybe move it to
yeah,
the
where is that meeting?
It's in St. George.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so we'll figure out how many people are going if we have to move. I forgot at our last meeting to share good news, so yippee-yay, we get to have it now. I was speaking to Mary McGann, with whom I'm on the UMTRA steering committee, and she had received a personal call from Representative Curtis with good news that the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. Voted to appropriate the full $45 million that we want for continuing to move the tailings pile. So it's with the Senate now, and he seemed confident that they would also support the $45 million. So crossed fingers, but good so far. I had a meeting with the Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District. I was just going to mention, people probably know there was a fire in that area recently, and one of the things they discussed at the last meeting was the possibility of maybe doing some vegetation clearing, given concerns related to that. I attended the joint meeting that the Grand County Council and San Juan County Commission had on Monday, as did a bunch of you, so I will just touch on a few things because you probably all have comments. One of the interesting things in comments that I thought Jalen Hawks from the Grand County Council mentioned was that she's currently reading a book that sounded like it might be of interest to several of us, called Balancing Nature and Commerce in Gateway Communities. It was actually written some time ago, but still utterly relevant from what it sounds like she's saying. So there's some extra reading. some of the topics that came up between the Grand County Council and San Juan Commission, I just thought would be interesting too for folks who weren't able to make it. Among other things, we always see between bodies some discussion about how one is impacting the other. So I thought one interesting example was the San Juan Commission bringing up that they feel like ATVs that are being rented in Grand County are being brought to Hurrah Pass and causing impacts to the road and the trails there that they're then having to pick up as San Juan County. So we've all had similar discussions, but there was interest across the board in coming together, and I think they would welcome the city to be part of this, to talk with our representatives, Representative Albrecht especially, about putting together some legislation on the TRT. So I'm sure they'll be in touch about that. I just thought it was good that there were a lot of citizen comments about from that area wanting more ordinances for San Juan County that address dark sky, water, and air. So kind of nice for us to know as we share the valley. And some discussion there about the truck stop and the bypass and moratoriums. I was just noticing, I just had one or two things to mention to the council, that there's yet another CAST, Colorado Association of Ski Towns meeting, and I don't know if anyone's been able to go for a while, but I know a bunch of people haven't been able to go before, and I certainly haven't been able to go for a while, but since we were paying members, I thought it's probably nice for us maybe to look at a calendar and figure out who can go when, because it does seem to be such a great group to interact with.
David did regularly.
Yeah. So, and I would encourage you and other council members to go because it's been so good for networking.
So do you plan to pick up and attend those meetings, or should that be a council member?
I'm more than happy to rotate. I mean, I'd like to go to them from time to time, but I don't think I need to go to every one of them.
Yeah.
They're quarterly, I believe.
Yeah, I haven't even looked at the schedule recently. I know there's one on the 20th in Breckenridge, but that's kind of short notice, yeah. And then I did notice too, reading my Utah League of Cities and Towns newsletter, that instead of having their meetings in June and August, they're gonna do caucus meetings. And so I was just gonna bring to people's attention, if you haven't signed up, on Wednesday the 19th, you can join the webcast for Rural Hub and Resort Community, the caucus, and it just sounded interesting in the sense that they wanted to continue the conversation started at mid-year having to do with economic development, tax reform, housing challenges with the Rural Hub resort communities. And also, it says here that the Political Subdivisions Interim Committee asked them to take a deep dive into particular challenges facing resort communities. So that sounded promising. I think that was everything.
And you can participate with those caucuses online.
Yeah,
And Joel and Karen are with Rachel, going to be there in person.
Oh, that's good. I wanted to know who was there.
So,
And
but participating online, you're right.
And normally you can just go to the link, but this time I noticed that they want you to RSVP. So in case that helps anybody else who wants to take part.
Do you get the LPC emails? We should all be prescribed or subscribed. Okay, so that you can sign up. Thanks for mentioning that, Ronnie.
I get every email on the planet, I think.
Thanks,
Don't
Cameron
get
Deal.
that one. Yeah.
Great deal.
I want to warn all of you to be sure to speak into the mic. Mr. Mark is here, and he may yell at you if you don't. I went to the same meeting Ronnie did last night. They talked again about TRT taxes and talking about how they need to talk to their state legislators, and I encourage them to forget that right for the moment and instead draft the ordinance that all of us here in the area would like to see and take that to our state legislators, because I don't think the state legislators are actually going to create legislation on our behalf. So I encourage them to take a more aggressive technique. I don't know if they're going to agree with me, but that was my recommendation. I just came back from the Grand County Planning Commission meeting. They're talking about the moratorium, and I just got in on the very first part of it, but we can expect at some point a world of people coming in complaining about abuse of their private property rights, just so you guys will all be, if you didn't know that, then there was evidence of it there. And on the water front, I'm happy to report that we have two studies, a USGS and a Ken Combs report, and myself and another water board member have made some good progress reconciling the numbers in both reports and coming to terms with how much usable water. That's one mistake that a lot of people make. They think that a relatively large number of safe yield water means that's how much we've all got to pump from wells, and that's not the case because a lot of it just can't really be made available. So we're working on getting that report to you, and I'm trying to write you guys a nice, simple, non-technical thing that'll help you understand what the reports are all about. So I'm looking forward to that. And finally, Mr. Williams, I want to encourage you again to go over to First West if you haven't already done so and talk to the flower shop people over there, see what you can do to help their parking. They're not the only ones.
I sent you an email this afternoon.
Oh, did you? Okay. Forgive me, I hadn't seen that. I didn't know. That'd be good. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for the water quantity advocacy and information.
I attended I don't even know the name of that group, Kaylin. Is it the Realtors Board? I attended a meeting with the Realtors Board with Kaylin and Joel. And overall, it was a productive, interesting meeting. They shared their fears about our moratorium and our work with Landmark. And I think we made there was some good conversation that was had. So that's it.
Thanks, Tony.
So it started the week off with HMK 6th grade graduation.
Can you bring the microphone down, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
So 6th grade graduation. And Taryn K, Principal K, reminded all of the 6th grade class if they were to do 4 nice things until they're seniors a day, it would be over 1 million nice deeds that would happen in our community. And I'd like for us to take that challenge too. It'd be an awesome thing to bring more niceness to Moab. Then I attended the airport board meeting. Department of Transportation awarded $4.7 million to redo the taxiway. The new airport schedule is going to start on September 21st, and you will be able to get a flight to Denver at 11 a.m., 3 p.m., or 6 p.m., and the flight to Denver will be $74. On June 6th, I attended the Grand County Change of Government Study Committee open house, and just to learn a little bit about what the new change of government will look like, and we were able to submit anonymous surveys as to for a questionnaire as to what we'd like to see as citizens, not as council. But and then June 10th, I attended yesterday also with the Joint County Council San Juan County meeting, and then I bummed myself on the river with Vicki Varela as well. It was like the third time I've been on the Colorado River in 23 years. Took a paddleboard down, scared myself to death, but had a super fabulous time, and it was very fast. And it opened my eyes to just how amazing I'm a cyclist, so to get on the river was quite a new experience, and I recommend it to everyone.
And you had a good coach, right?
I had a great coach. But the most exciting thing is that Mrs. Varela was saying that she really does want to collaborate with us. And so if we can get organized as a group, Emily and I talked to her about ATVs, and she is absolutely willing to back what it is that we were trying to accomplish for our community. So I encourage us to talk about what it is very specifically as our ask, and then we can go to the legislators. And that was it.
Thanks, Karen.
The Solid Waste District hosted the Resiliency Hub Tea and a Topic last month, and up at the recycling center, and I attended, and we discussed a range of innovative possibilities for the future of solid waste in Moab, different things we can do with all that plastic that we can't recycle. I attended the Housing Task Force, and we talked about, HASU is going to have an intern, so we talked about what their priorities might be to help out with the housing situation. And
An intern or a Vista?
I don't remember.
I think
kind
they
of
might
lumped
be
them
getting
together.
a Vista.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I met with the Realtors Board, like Tawny mentioned, and the main topic of discussion seemed to be what happens to existing short-term rentals in C2. Always a hot topic in Moab, which takes up lots of our time. That's it.
Thanks, Kaylin.
So I attended a Meet the Chief event.
Well, I just want to say that we're on agenda item 6, administrative reports.
I apologize.
No worries.
I attended a Meet the Chief event held at Canyonland Auto Sales. It was pretty well attended, and they donated $10 per person for everyone who attended to the police department. So that was pretty cool. We've begun interviews for the assistant chief position. They're ongoing. We did the initial interviews last week, and they now have to do some presentations and some other things that are part of that process. So that's happening. We had declaration for candidates for the 3 open spots on council last week, and we had 11 people sign up to run for city council. And I want to thank Jamie and Summer for putting together the books and manning that up and tackling that little task. So that was pretty good. So we have the interim session coming up, which I'll be attending. And then if I could get you guys to email me the locations of the speed limits where you would like paintings, so I have some better directive, because I know in the meeting we discussed it, but it was like, it's over on First East and it's over on, is pretty loose. And so if we can get, like, you know, hone that in a little bit through email, we'll start getting staff, and we've started ordering signs, and we'll get that done up. We also are presenting or preparing for the next agenda scooter legislation and the idling ordinance changes, and they both be on the next council agenda. So,
Thank you so much for that.
and then Chuck was going to talk to you guys a little bit about a couple things. And I talked to the chief, and the chief is going to plan on giving a council report monthly on the second meeting of every month. So
Thank you.
he'll be here next week or next time.
Just wanted to report on 2 things. One is that the Mill Creek Road west up to the USU campus is moving right along. We're hoping to pave either next week or the following week, with project completion coming along end of July-ish. And so I would, if we're going to be looking at some type of a ribbon cutting event or something, certainly by mid-August, I think things should be, it should be complete.
Could we do a sidewalk chalk event?
Should do a street dance.
Close the street for a party?
They're doing
Party?
They're doing a sidewalk chalk art event. The mark is, and I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but they're full-on artists doing one. So
Let's make it fun.
Well, so it's mid-August is what I'd recommend. It's moving along, so let the party planners begin, I think. And then the second one, if I may quickly, is that Barry from our building official and I called a meeting with the school district and with the new Radcliffe Hotel, which is essentially where Gearheads is. And with City Market attended, the fire district attended, the chief of police attended. There's going to be concurrent construction going on in about the next 6 weeks. So we came up with a consensus-based plan to deal with minimize impacts to traffic and businesses. And so what I'm hoping is that we can schedule a work session with council in the next couple of weeks so we can brief you and get your feedback on that as well. But I just wanted to be first pass, let you know that it's coming.
You want to schedule that before our next meeting in 2 weeks?
I'll be
Could we do
ready
it?
by Monday with the draft plan that we kind of all came up with. So anytime after that would be excellent. Yes.
Is it something you could just email to council to review, or is that something you want to have a meeting?
Yeah, it's going to be, I'm sure it will generate questions.
So I will be not here next week.
Following week
I
would
will
be-
not be here next week.
Following week would be fine
Need a
based on what they're
vacation.
saying.
Okay, well, if you want to notice it, Tawny, you'll just,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can, whatever's good for you.
Or is it, it's the 24th or next Tuesday meeting?
Yeah.
Is that,
The 25th.
or 25th, would that work?
If we could do a work session, yeah, I'd like to have
Okay.
an hour to go through.
Oh, like lunch?
Yes,
dur-
that'd be
the
great. And then we
Tuesday
can
of our
bring in
council
some of the other
meeting.
folks
Okay.
too, so you
Okay.
can get feedback from them as well.
Oh, good. So Tuesday lunch of our next council meeting, we can do that.
Yeah, I think
Great.
that'd be good.
Okay, that works. Thanks.
All I had.
Thanks, Chuck. Any other uh,
Nope.
administrative reports?
That's it for this week, Mayor.
Okay, we're at section 7, citizens to be heard. I don't have any forms in front of me.
I have forms for you.
So we have two things. We have the citizens to be heard, then we have a public hearing specific to the budget. So citizens to be heard.
Citizens to be heard, your public comment forms for the public hearing are
Yeah.
very large format tonight.
Okay, Mark Horowitz.
Citizens to be heard for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Breathe. I'm learning to speak in public. They say Mike referenced my concern that the county council does not apply here. Your microphones work a great deal better than theirs. And may I say, your professionalism stands out. I've just come from the County Planning Commission, and it's a clown show over there. And it's coming to this room here pretty darn soon. Last week, every person who stood up said, option number 5, this week, it's realtors and developers demanding their private property rights are sacred to them. Well, but that is not to my comment for tonight. My comment is, just 1 year ago, I was here with the very same comment I'm going to have for tonight. And as we sat here, 10 houses were burning to the ground.
Right.
Fire is my biggest concern. I have 13 of the largest trees in the county, and I cherish them. I don't care about my house, but I sure care about my trees. Last year, the community's awareness was astounding. For the first time in the 20 years that I've lived at my house, after the 4th of July show, it was like Christmas Eve. Not a sound, not a high flyer, not a firework went off in this town, and I thank God for that. And to that end, I'm going to ask that we've had extra rain. It's maybe not so hot out there right now, but I know the weeds are high next to me, and my neighbors who are in the county don't seem to care so much, or at least until last year, nobody seemed to care. The high flyers go like crazy. How does that affect? Do you affect that? I'm asking you, please, to not approve fireworks stands this year in the county. It's like, the fireworks stand is down the street from me. It's about 300 feet from the county line. And nobody really seems to know or care whether they're in the city or in the county. All I know is if you sell fireworks to people who live in the county and they're not legal in the county, it's like selling cigarettes to kids and telling them not to smoke. All I'm saying is if a fireworks stand sells fireworks in the city and it catches my house and my trees on fire, I don't know who am I supposed to turn to? Who am I supposed to blame? If they catch a perpetrator, great. If not, I'm just a big loser. Whoever loses their house this year, I don't know. All I can say is what I said last year. Please do not approve fireworks stands in the city where people are going to use them in the fireworks. I got to say, lastly, I know you're putting on a 4th of July party, but there's no fireworks allowed down there. I'd like to see somebody in the city or in the county make a place where people can take those fireworks, their personal fireworks, and shoot them all off together in a place that's safe. The high school, the ball field across the street, the county equestrian center, whatever it's called down there, the arena, someplace where people can shoot them off, and because people like to blow stuff up, guys do anyway. My comment, I reiterate, please do not allow fireworks stands in the city this year.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mayor, real quickly, just to comment on the beginning aspects of that, the weeds and that, as people go and they maintain their weeds and they cut them down, that's wildfire mitigation. And if they go to the Moab Valley Fire Protection, they have the Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan, they can get a form or they can go onto the Utah State Fire Marshal's webpage and they can report what they're cutting down and the fire mitigation that they're doing. And that goes against the cost that the fire department has to pay to the state if we do have a fire, and their cost of what they have to pay to have coverage. And so as people are cutting their weeds and doing that fire mitigation around their house, if they go on that webpage, they can fill out the form. It just takes a minute. It submits it.
Can we
And
post that on Facebook?
Absolutely.
Can we
That'd be
at least
great.
post that? Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Joel. Are there any other citizens to be heard? General. Okay, moving right along. 8.1, presentation of the Mayor's Student Citizenship of the Month Award for the Moab Charter School for June 2019. Allie Goldtooth, please join me up front.
You got the hang of it.
natural.
Want to turn your chair around though? Because we're going to celebrate you. You know, we've never sat before, but I guess I like it. Is it Polly? Hi, Polly. Whereas, it's not working.
We got you.
You got me?
We got you.
Can I get a check?
Yes, you got a check.
Very loud, huh?
We'll fix that.
Whereas the staff and faculty of the Moab Charter School on a monthly basis select a student of the month based on the student's citizenship and their involvement with their school.
Probably can ban.
And whereas it is the desire of the city of Moab to foster and recognize the contributions of the young people of this community in regards to good citizenship. Now therefore, the city of Moab joins with the Moab Charter School in recognizing Ali Goldtooth as an outstanding student. Actually, you might want to stand up for this. As an outstanding student, a positive role model, and a shining example for our community. Therefore, I, Emily S. Niehaus, Mayor of the City of Moab, do hereby proclaim Ali Goldtooth as the Student of the Month for June 2019. Would somebody like to say a few words about this outstanding student? You bet, sure, I'll be brief. Ali came to us partway through the year this year. I'm Carrie Ann, I'm the director of Moab Charter School, and all the teachers said, we need to recognize this guy. Since he came, he was kind, he was inclusive of his friends and peers of all ages. And so we just want to say, great job coming in and just showing us your very best. We really appreciate you. Welcome to the family. I'm excited to work with you for more years. Go spend that money on ice cream. And you're not required to stay for the rest of this meeting if you want to go home and celebrate. Congratulations. We are moving on to 9, public hearing. 9.1, solicitation and public input on proposed ordinance 2019-12, an ordinance adopting the City of Moab pay plan schedule and adopting the exempt and elected officials' salaries for fiscal year 2019 and 2020. Allison Brown.
My name's Allison Brown, and I'm here as a citizen, not a planning commission member. Is this going? It is. Okay. And I'll be brief. I believe you guys ran for mayor and council because you had a vision for the city, not because you needed a job. You've proposed a 2% COLA for all city employees, except the planning commission. You've proposed a 230 annual increase in compensation for yourselves, mainly in health benefits. What I would ask is, I would like each of you to justify to all of the other part-time city employees why you are more deserving of health benefits than they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Hicks.
Good evening. Barbara Hicks here. I'm not real clear what the final recommendation, or you guys are going to be voting on for your what I call your compensation package. But on the handout, it's $25,193 for starting in January. And I don't know if that's includes your base pay or if that's part of the health insurance. Can somebody explain that?
Stay tuned. It's an agenda item where we'll likely have discussion.
Okay. I wish you'd had that discussion prior to me speaking, because I am definitely in favor of increased compensation, and my primary reason is you guys have really not gotten a big raise like in 20 years, and unfortunately you're playing catch up and it's happening all in 1 year. I'm sorry that that's falling on your shoulders, but it's long overdue, and whatever you come up with, I'm sure it's going to be fair and equitable. I would like to see a final agreement, say, on a base pay for starting in January plus retirement and plus health insurance. And I even heard maybe from Eve today that there might be a health savings account you might be discussing. I think those are all great options, and I wish you the best in making the best decision. But I'm behind you 100%.
Thank you, Barbara. Are there other citizens that would like to be heard during the public hearing? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you for those who spoke. Moving right along, we are at 10-1, old business. Proposed ordinance 2019-12, adopting the City of Moab pay plan schedule and adopting the exempt and elected officials' salaries for fiscal year 2019 and 2020. Consideration and adoption. I asked Danny to join us here, so that we can, and the reason, I just want to say, the reason why we are noticing this as an agenda item on the same night as we're having a public hearing for this agenda item is that I wanted to give the council the opportunity to have follow-up conversation and a question and answer opportunity with Danny without any pressure at all to move forward with a motion that would in any way adopt, but that it would just give us the opportunity to have much-needed dialogue to inform this decision, because this decision is not one that we are taking lightly at all. So thank you, Danny, for joining us. And again, as I said, there is, in noticing this item, no pressure to make any decisions and nor expectation that we would decide on this agenda item tonight. So, having said that, I did ask Danny to put together, to clarify what was proposed as part of the public hearing, what was proposed as agenda attachments for this agenda. It's important, there's a logistical moment of truth that we need to have with Civics Plus, which is what we use to publish our agenda items and attachments. And like all good tech, there are glitches. And so there were certain things that were included that, that were glitches. And if you looked at the original PDF, they were not included. So we are taking a very hard look and re-examining whether or not we use Civics Plus for moving forward with agenda items, or if nothing else, creating a PDF link so that you can look at actual packet. Other than working out that kink, and apologies to everyone that has suffered from that, that there was not an intention of putting out misinformation or confusing information. So thank you, Danny, for spending the time to put together what we have in front of us. And are there some forms available outside if people want to look at them, or do we have a couple of?
There's a couple.
We do have a couple extras. We did have some comments, so if members joining us tonight, community members want to look at this with us, we do have a couple.
So Mayor, we bring this before you guys tonight as the budget was adopted last meeting. We are now adopting what the pay scale would be. The budget number that was adopted is already there. This is just a decision on how that pay will, what form it will take. It's required by state law that we pass a payment plan for exempt and elected figures within the city. And so by doing this is in compliance with that code that we're doing so.
Is there any way that we could do this a month prior to approving budget? Is there a time that it's required to be passed? Because it would certainly be less
No.
problem. So.
Here's
okay.
why. We can't adopt the pay prior to adopting the budget. We have to know what the budget amount is before you can decide how you're going to divvy that up and then spend it. You'd be spending your paycheck before you had it, essentially. So.
Thank you.
Most cities, you guys are ahead of the curve by adopting your budget and now working to adopt your pay scale. Most cities adopt their budget, they adopt their pay scale, and they amend and adopt their final version of their prior fiscal year budget all the same night. So you guys are already doing it much better than most.
Okay, it's just that it was a little confusing for some,
Yeah.
so thanks for the clarification.
If I may, Mayor, may I ask one question? Joel, Danny, so it was my understanding that the preliminary, at least the preliminary budget that we've adopted so far, does contain what I might call a placeholder. In other words, what we might reasonably expect the maximum compensation to be paid to mayor and council might be, knowing that we may adopt something different that perhaps is less expensive. And if so, then no great harm is done. The general fund just has a little bit of extra money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I want to point out too, just so that it's very clear, especially in that we have attachment A and attachment B, that that I have not heard any comments regarding attachment A, that the pay scale for employees has not, it really, we're just focused on the details of attachment B or the council salaries. Is that where everyone's sitting with the pay scale, pay plan? Okay. So, so Danny, back to you. There's been a lot of questions regarding insurance, HRA, HSA, health insurance equivalent. And I think it's worth it, again, to take a trip down memory lane and remember that the council, with the adoption of the ACA and the changing of the insurance policy back in 2015, that is when the city council lost insurance. But the city council always had insurance up until that point, and it was lost in 2015. And at that time, the mayor and council did not propose to to compensate for the difference and offer a health insurance equivalent. Also, that the mayor, prior to me, enjoyed health benefits until his last day in office. And so there hasn't been a in-state health insurance as much as there's been a reinstate health insurance benefits and or its equivalent value. And so that is what we are looking at, and that is the justification of sorts that we are moving forward with. In that vein, maybe we can look at what's interesting on this first page is that our budgeted amount is very similar to what the options are that we're looking at. And so we're okay in terms of what was passed as budget. It's just the way that we redistribute the numbers might change here or there. Correct. Or be less. So that feels good that we're in line in terms of what we passed as budget. So then on the second page, Danny, I don't know if you want to take us through these scenarios that we
Yeah, sure.
have.
So I was asked to put together a couple different scenarios and how this could work for you guys. On the second sheet, you'll see I broke out mayor and council because they are slightly different in amounts. The first three options cost the same. They're a little bit different on how it's paid out, but they all cost the same. So the first one is your annual base salary plus your 2% COLA plus insurance, and that's the same that we offer to all full-time employees. Your second is just your annual base plus COLA, and then putting what we would have paid for your health insurance into an HRA plan. And the third is your annual base plus COLA plus a health equivalent. So that would be paying that out as a salary versus putting it into an HRA or paying for health insurance. All three of those are going to cost the same as far as budgetary purposes. Your fourth option is your annual base pay plus COLA and then putting money into an HSA. An HSA does have a max limit that is set by the IRS. Right now it's $3,500 for a single and $7,000 for a family. So no more than that can be put in there. So that one is quite a bit lower as what the cost would be. And the last option would be just your health equivalent only with no base salary. So that would be just what it would cost to provide health insurance given as a salary.
Danny, I have a quick question. So with the HSA, isn't it 35 is from the city and then 35 is from the individual?
For a family. So
For a family.
For a family, you can put in a total of $7,000 and it can be employer or employee contributions, but it can't go above that $7,000.
Right, but half of that is actually from the employee, is correct? I mean, it's split.
Close. So $2,500 is what we match on employees right now, and $1,000 is based on a wellness benefit. If
Oh, gotcha.
in that.
Okay.
And that's if you have insurance with your primary employer.
To qualify for an HSA, you have to be on a high deductible health plan. So you'd have to have insurance that qualifies for that. And then for an HRA, you have to be on an employer-sponsored health plan is the key for that one. And we can go through all, if you guys wanted, I mean, we do it now, you can do it individually. We can go through all the differences when you guys are making your choices to which works best.
And one choice could be that we allow council the option of insurance. So each member of this council can say either, I'll take insurance, or I'll take HRA, or I'll take HSA, or I'll take a health insurance equivalent. So that is something
You have to be on the plan to take the HSA. You can't just have an HSA
Not without
as a
high deductible.
standalone.
Not without a high deductible
Right.
health plan, yeah.
Okay. Tell me, give me a definition of a health equivalent.
As far as what, like option 5, the health equivalent only?
Or 3, what?
So what that would be is that would be your annual salary plus your 2% COLA, and then plus what we would have paid for your health insurance, and it's all given as an annual salary instead of put towards the health insurance. So
Okay.
it would be a cash amount.
So if a council member chose that number 3 option, they could choose what they wanted to do with their own money, in essence. Okay.
Okay, so one easy clarification for me. I take it that under no circumstances could one of us take a salary, cash, so to speak, what you're calling a health equivalent, I think, and spend it on a city, send it to the city with which they would purchase a health benefits, an insurance package for us. In other words, does that make any sense?
That's
So-
number 5.
so-
That's number
So,
1.
Mike, I think what you're asking is, could I do number 5, but get health insurance with it?
Yeah. Well, well, I'm sure we could, yeah. So under number 5, certainly, that's the cash part, if you will.
Yeah.
Right, but the one thing that we couldn't do with it is ask the city to purchase a health insurance policy.
I mean, I would recommend if that was the way you'd want to go, that you would just have us purchase it instead of giving you the money, then you giving it back to us to do the same thing would make more sense.
But I think what he's pointing out is there's no option 6, which would be health insurance coverage only, which is essentially what you're asking for.
Yeah.
But isn't that Number 5?
Yeah, you could do that with number 5.
Yeah,
There's no
that's
problem with
number
that.
5.
Number 5, you could take the cash equivalent, or you could use it to buy health insurance through the city.
Right. So you're choosing.
But you would still receive money, you would still receive salary?
Nope,
No, that'd be number 1.
no.
Number 1, you would receive insurance, and then you would also receive a base salary. We didn't put, what Mike's requesting, we didn't put on there. We didn't, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. You could absolutely do that. We just didn't, it never came up. No one ever requested that. It didn't, no one requested straight health insurance.
Well, Danny, the reason I asked, and forgive me because I wasn't here at the last meeting,
Wait, are you saying health insurance not equivalent and no base pay?
I was just asking the specific question that if one of us elected our compensation to be in cash, which I think they're calling health equivalent only, could we then turn, I mean,
At that point, you're just gonna have
Yes.
a choice. You're gonna say, I'm gonna go to Danny, I'm gonna say, I'd like the equivalent, which would be, I'm gonna get a salary, basically. Or I would say, Danny, I'm gonna sign up for health insurance, and that's what I'm gonna get. Period.
but you could get it through the city. That's my
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
Yes.
yes,
It's the,
yes.
Mayor, to answer your question, the answer is yes. It's the negative inverse. He's saying, can I get
Yes.
paid and then use it to buy health insurance, which would just be the equivalent of us giving health insurance? Yes.
Yeah.
That's number 5.
Well, not necessarily, because as an individual, if you're a one-person family or a two-person family, you would get the equivalent, which is are we saying that the equivalent is for the same for all members? Because if so, then you
I
would
see.
get the, if we are saying the equivalent is at a family rate, you would still have, because you're a family of 2, right? So if the equivalent's 25, but your insurance only costs
18.
18,
I understand.
then
Or
you
it was
would,
18,198.
you would you would still receive cash.
I understand that.
So you couldn't actually, while Karen could forgo all salary, you could not forgo all salary toward health insurance benefit. If we say that that the equivalent is hung to a family rate as opposed to hung to everyone's individual family amount. So that's the difference there.
Well, Danny, forgive, and you guys correct me, 'cause, again, I wasn't here, but in talking to everybody over the weekend, it seems like there's 2 schools of thought here. I mean, one has, some people prefer, of the current council, keep in mind, I'm trying to head for an option that not only works for us, but more so works for the desired benefits. I mean, what we're trying to do is attract, first of all, we're trying to give ourselves some sort of increased compensation for what we feel is overdue, and it's a lot of work to do this kind of job, while at the same time recognizing that it is in a sense, a volunteer effort. None of us, had really, and giving back to the community. So myself, I'm willing to accept a substandard salary, but still one that's larger than the pretty meager one that we get now. And having said all that, so if there's one camp that says, if we just got paid cash, and we could, in other words, a substantially higher salary amount, and forego benefits, and that gives us a lot of flexibility. And then if you turn around and tell me that with that salary amount, we could either purchase an HRA or an HSA or a city insurance package, that seems to me, if I've got this right, that's kind of the best of all worlds. It gives everybody a lot of flexibility.
That's true.
So as these are written, can individual council members pick 1 through 5, or do we all have to
Right.
pick the same one?
That's entirely up to you.
We could actually.
You could adopt it, so you just pick 1 through 5 as you come in, or you guys can make a motion and adopt that everyone
Well,
has to
that's
do
not
number
true.
1.
No,
That
that
would be
isn't.
1 through 4. 5 is a standalone option. 1 through 4 would be, you get to pick between insurance, HRA, HSA, or health equivalent. If we choose 5, it's kind of a standalone. It's just the health equivalent. It's a raise. Or
it's insurance.
an insurance. You choose. It's its own choice.
What do these break out? I mean, this is the total cost. What do these break out per council member? Has that been done anywhere?
Yes. Yes, I have it. I don't have it in front of me. It's just this
Just
number.
divided by 5.
Divided by 5?
Yeah.
So do you want me to do that number
No,
for
I know
you?
I know how to divide. I just do it the old-fashioned way.
I do it the calculator way. So 180s
I don't either.
divided by 5. 36,121.
36, yeah.
And again, that does not change the base salary. It simply adds insurance or insurance option.
But if you take the health equivalent, it will change your salary.
It will, but then you can apply that health equivalent to health insurance or similar.
I understand that.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful for this information and just being very respectful to this council to give so that we have time to digest information and make a really thoughtful decision. And knowing that while we are looking at it as this body here today, that these numbers that we approve, we've all said would not take into effect until January of next year, number one. And number two, that we're looking forward at future councils. And in response to the increase that we saw with the county council, just wanting to be at least in a compatible framework.
So they're, just to put it out there, they're at 32 and 36.
They're at 32 and 36.
The chair.
And they do not have health insurance benefits. Is that right, 32 and 36? 31 something and 36, yeah. And no insurance benefits. So they essentially went with the health insurance, their base plus health insurance equivalent. That's what they did. And worth it too that they did, to mention that they did salary comparison to come to their conclusion.
31 and 36, 425.
Thank you. And so that 36 is whoever's designated as chair for that year receives that additional compensation. So what would you all like to do? Sit with this information and
just speaking for myself, you guys may have completely different ideas. I just want to make sure I understand the options that you guys are listening to me. So I may ask you later on individual questions, just make sure I got this straight and just think on it a little bit and come up with something, because if I may, I mean, that's what I would prefer.
to wait to make the decision and
Yeah, I would make a
ask
decision a little bit
questions.
later on, yeah, because I just want to clarify, because, for example, the options that Joel and Danny listed to me, in my mind, I'm not sure they quite add up to what I see on the list here. And I don't think it's a problem, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, I think also it's really important for us to recognize two things. One is that what we approve in our budget includes more than just pay, because employers, and we are our own employers, employers are required to pay for things like workers' comp, employer taxes, and so that is included in the overall budget amount. but not included, not represented in salary amounts. So just in case that's been confusing for members, that's why the salary number has been more than, if you add up just these numbers here, they're not going to match the budget, because the budget, and I think you put this, so on the first page, required costs paid by the city. So when you have an employee, you pay them their salary, but then you as an employer have to pay additional things like workers' comp, FICA, and disability, which is like a benefit much later in life for us. But it's a required, if you have an employee, it's a required thing. So that's why the annual budget number doesn't add up to the total salary.
I agree, no problem there.
So hopefully that's helpful. And then the other thing that I was going to say, it was a funny numbers thing. Oh, I just think when staff was looking back at some of the comments that were made regarding differences in numbers, that some of that was the Civics Plus problem. That was different than what was in the final PDF. So, for what that's
I
worth.
just have a question on this first page, Danny, at the very top. It says does not include any pay for council from July to December 31st of this year. Does that mean we have to go without pay this year?
Yes, no, absolutely not. No, we actually were talking about that when I was putting this together to our meeting, and at the time, we believed that the correction had not been made prior to the budget being adopted. And then after I put this together, we found out that it had, so you can actually ignore that line. So we are definitely paying you.
I was just confused
Yes,
about that.
we will make sure and pay you.
But what's interesting is that what was budgeted did not actually include salaries for any of us for the remainder of this year. However, that budgeted amount, if we were to add into health insurance benefits, is roughly the same number. So what we have budgeted is actually roughly the same number that's being proposed if council members choose to go with
Number 5.
salary plus insurance.
Oh.
Yeah, salary plus insurance is same in line with what was budgeted.
Will future council members have the option to change that yearly like you do if you're staff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's entirely up to you guys. I mean, if you set it up that's how you want it to work, then that's how it'll work. If that's a policy decision you guys have to make.
Yeah, so we could actually decide that every year, at the beginning of every year, we're all required to meet with Danny and select our choice of
So we
insurance.
just go through open enrollment
Correct. Yep.
like normal? Okay.
I have some questions. Timeline-wise, I mean, independent of the council, we obviously have all the city employees here, who need salaries approved. And what's our deadline for that, when we need to approve that?
You can table it if you need to next week.
You
have
mean
enough
to next
time.
meeting?
Yeah, excuse me, yes.
And so is one option to vote to approve for the other employees and not the council? Is that in any way preferable, or one doesn't split them?
No, and if it was put off to the 25th of June and past the 25th of June, our pay period that would adopt it we would basically have staff who would be crunching all these numbers and getting it all in the following Wednesday morning to do pay run for that following Friday to adopt it into the next year. I mean, it'd be tight, but it can be done. No legal requirement that it be done by.
The ordinance is for the salaries for the fiscal year 2019-2020, so starting July 1st regardless. If we don't do it this month, that's when it becomes
We would then-
especially
Because
Yes.
COLA would
annoying.
COLA would be as of,
It would get super tricky if you went past the next meeting. We would have to then go back, retroact what you did, because technically it's for the fiscal year. This year is July 1, so it would get messy.
Part of the reason I ask is because I think in the last, the May 28th workshop and meeting, I went back and listened, and I think Rachel was pointing it out because the council wouldn't be looking at any increases other than potentially a COLA until January. That one potentially could take more time. So
You could make a
one of my
motion.
questions is how that would work.
You could craft a motion to pass the resolution striking the elected pay, and then that have to be brought back as a second motion. But then, or a second resolution, it would just become a whole new resolution. So you would pass this resolution minus elected salary. Or a better way to do it would actually be to amend it to only adopt salary as presented as till December 31st, and then readdress it from there. That'd be the better way to do it.
Okay.
Sorry, we're making this as we go.
But
I
are
happen
you
to think.
having to make a budget adjustment at that time?
We wouldn't have to make a budget adjustment because it'd be far below what's already budgeted for the salary. So I mean, if December 31st came, we would have to, at that point, just have to have in place what you wanted going forward. And if we adopted something that increased the amount past what we're proposing here, then we would have to make it a budget adjustment. But if you adopted, let's say we amended the resolution to adopt the pay plan for employees as laid out and adopt for council July 1 to December 31 to include your pay as previously budgeted, and then we came back in December and you adopted one of these options, that would already be budgeted for. If you came back and wanted to double one of these or something and it went past the number we expected, then yes, we'd have to do a budget opening, but not to continue to do what we're doing.
I encourage this council not to kick the ball down the field or can, or whatever that metaphor is, where you delay making a decision. I really think that we've had a lot of dialogue and a lot of deliberation, and we've been communicating with the public, and we've received a lot of feedback. And I think that we need to, out of respect for the citizens that have commented, come to a place of a decision.
Quick follow-up question. I know in one of our meetings, Tawny, you had asked about increasing payment to planning commission members, and I don't know if that just got forgotten or not followed up on, but in terms of how they're compensated, does something like the question about a 2% COLA apply, or is it a different system, right?
It's a totally different system. In fact, Planning Commission was not historically compensated for attending meetings. The reason why that was implemented was for a lack of attendance and quorum. Summer, do you know when it was implemented?
Not off the top of my head, several
2 years
couple
ago?
years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
And it's and the intention of that is that it is a stipend for attending,
So
and it's not. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, your Utah code lays out how we can compensate members of a planning commission, and it is based off a per diem amount set by council that's for actual cost and travel to and from the meeting. So
It's actually quite a high per diem.
yeah, it's not, you can't set a salary and pay planning commission members a salary like you can city council members. It's not allowed under the code. It's per diem for actual costs and meetings
Now,
attended.
if we think it costs more than $50 per meeting for a planning commission member to attend, then we could discuss that.
On average, it's 50 to 100 throughout the state. Some get 150, the max that I've ever seen.
But that's like boards where you're
Yes.
traveling.
Yes.
Like for us, like if I were to, as I serve on the water quality board, I waived compensation, but compensation could be provided to me as a board member for going, sleeping over. And the reason why I waived it is because I participate online for those meetings, so that it's not a cost to anyone for me to participate.
So Joel, planning commission members, if they attend other meetings other than just the standard regularly scheduled planning meetings, are they compensated for those?
If you guys statutorily set that out in an ordinance that says if they're on city business, they're attending on your behalf as a planning commission member, yeah, per diem for actual costs and meetings attended.
And they're also given compensation for attending trainings and travel for those trainings.
So for example, if you guys got together with county planning commission, for example, that would qualify. as
That would be a
meeting if they
notice
get paid.
meeting, and they would receive their stipend.
Okay, that helps.
Well, I would like to look at increasing that at some time. Do we have to do it with this
guess if you want to do that for the coming year, we would, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can, especially, I mean, I don't want to dissuade you guys from taking whatever option you want to take. If you want to table it and push it out to the next meeting, it will make a lot of work for us, but it's not, I don't want that to dissuade you if you wanted more time to think about it. The 6-month plan is a very long-range plan, and that is.
Can I go back to Planning Commission real quick? Because is there any test for a compensation? So knowing that it's residents within the city attending a city council meeting at the city council chambers at $50 as their deemed compensation. Like if we were to go beyond $50, would people be like,
50's pretty standard for planning commission, 100's on the upper end, 150's not common at all.
so we could increase without any sort of batting of the eyelashes of compensation for
Yeah.
planning commission
And
members?
a lot of planning commissions are not compensated at all.
And ours wasn't until we had low attendance.
Yep.
And there was a question last year that where it was whether or not we were going to continue with the new bylaws because of
And this isn't like,
attendance.
this is the state code. I mean, I'm looking at it. The legislative body may authorize member to receive per diem and travel expenses for meetings actually attended in accordance with section 1155-103. And then it trails out as to how that works. But I mean, it's the state law, and I don't agree with it. I don't think that it's necessarily fair. I think that they put up with as much as council at times on certain issues, not always, but on certain issues for sure. But they have set that limit in there for
So
boards.
So
another question I
I've
have
not heard
is-
from any planning commission members that they are asking for an increase.
I mean, Tawny has raised it, twice now and expressed interest in potentially increasing it. So I'm just curious, say this discussion goes on longer, if you could just, I mean, I can run a calculator, but maybe if you could come back with us or some numbers of what that would look like at different levels. I don't know if you want to suggest an amount, Tawny, or if we just leave that to Joel to, but I'd be interested in looking at that.
I guess my question
Yeah.
was, if we look at increasing the per diem for planning commission, do we have to do it with this ordinance?
Yes, we don't have to. We can always go back and amend this. Like, it's just like almost like a fee schedule. We can go in and amend it at any time, but to be clean, yes, it'd be beneficial to do it. But you could, if you wanted to pass it tonight, you could make a motion that you pass it as such with the amendment that planning commission be paid at this rate.
So another question, so understanding, that the council was receiving insurance until 2014 and the former mayor until 2018, and then that changed. Do those, if things increase now and, go back to offer some of those things, are those funds basically coming from the general fund? Just so I understand.
That's my understanding. I mean, they're not earmarked out of any specialty funds that we have, so they'd be general fund money.
Yeah.
I mean, I will just express my opinions about my opposition to voting tonight. I mean, first, because I don't like voting on something right after you've had a public hearing, but personally, I was very uncomfortable with, and understand we're dealing with some electronic issues, but what was in the packet, I couldn't understand it, so I didn't really understand how a member of the public was supposed to understand what was being proposed. And I was also uncomfortable that since we learned at our last meeting that there was some history of insurance until recently, that wasn't presented to the public. And so I just think it would be wrong to vote on this tonight. I don't feel like they had the information that we just got tonight to come make their comments. So I would be opposed to voting tonight, and I would kind of hope that we would have a second public hearing and then maybe with the option to vote the same night because it was the second one, but to actually give people the opportunity to comment on these numbers. And thank you again to staff for putting this together, because it's been very hard to figure out. Like I said, I went back and I listened to our last meetings. I couldn't figure out what was being proposed. At first I thought I was getting straight, and then I was like, no. And things have been different in the papers, not that that's the city's official statement, but I don't see how it can possibly be responsible to vote on it when Like I said, if I had been the public looking at the packet, I could not tell what, so how can I come speak to it?
Yeah, and that's completely reasonable. That's your guys'
And
direct.
other people can speak, but I feel strongly about that personally.
It's your guys' directive to us on how you want us to proceed. It's within the framework of the rules to have a public hearing and vote the same night. It's perfectly fine to have public comment and then vote in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or however long you want to wait. That's completely your directive to give to us. The places I've worked, it's about a 50-50 split. The half of them have voted the night they have a public hearing, so people who come out, they give their comment, they have the deliberation, and they have to vote, and it's all in one meeting, so they don't have to come back in 2 weeks or a month when they have it again. Other councils have said, we prefer to have the public hearing, and then have council have time to take that time, deliberate, have more time to soak it in, and then bring that back in 2 weeks and make it more formal as a part of their motion. So it's completely up to you guys how you want us to proceed, on some things that are any land use type things we do for development and for those changes, they require a public hearing. So if we do the 2 week requirement for every public hearing we have, it can delay development quite a bit. Sometimes development can be required to have 2 or 3 public hearings depending on the process. And so it can literally add months to certain processes by requiring that 2 weeks. So I am open to either.
Honestly,
6 is to me
personally, I
either
need
way.
time to digest this, yeah, because
Yep,
like I said, it didn't anything real clear to look at till tonight, so.
Yeah, it's completely
For
your
sharing
guys'
that, Ronnie.
directive.
Do other council members agree, or do you want to deal with it tonight?
I think, given the contents of the packet, it's fair to the public to put it off for a little while. This is much easier to understand. This makes an awful lot more sense than what we received. But I agree with Ronnie. I couldn't make heads nor tails of what was in the packet, and so I don't know that it's fair to the public. I mean, I'm torn between having a second public hearing. I think we have had one, and if people wanted to comment, they probably would have come and commented. This just makes it much clearer what they're commenting on. They still have time to contact us via email.
I will say that I've received overwhelming support of us moving forward with some type of health insurance or health insurance equivalent increase, and very little opposition.
That's true. So Danny, may I ask a couple of easy questions for you? I'm a Medicare guy. So under HRA guidelines, it says must be enrolled in other health insurance. Does Medicare count?
It does not.
Oh.
So with that, we would want to have a conversation. I'd want to sit down and talk to you about what those options are. If
Okay,
you're on Medicare.
so I couldn't elect HRA then because, well, now I have a supplemental policy. Does that count?
Possibly. I'll reach out to our provider and ask them. I'll ask them those questions and get clarification for you.
Okay.
But if something like HRA and SHA didn't work for somebody, then the equivalent could be something that you all decide as a catch to pass.
Okay, and HSA, you must be enrolled in a high deductible?
Yeah, HSA, if you're on Medicare, they consider that as your primary, and they do not consider it high deductible. So I know that in HSA,
okay.
you could not participate in.
So that's a no too. And finally, I may have given one of my council members a bum steer. I thought I remembered, in looking at my W-2 statements from years gone by, that benefits, including medical benefits from my employer, were taxed. I mean, whatever, but that's not the case. I was told that by somebody else. Okay, so
No,
my apology.
they come out pre-tax.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Is there a motion out there to?
I'll move to table.
Thank you, Ronnie.
A second.
Thank you, Tawny. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Danny. 10-2, consideration for approval of a portion of Emma Boulevard and amend the UTEX subdivision, Plat B, Lot 14, Section 26, T25S, R21E, SLBM. Will you members, before you leave, just state that you are recusing yourself?
I'm recusing myself.
Thank you. Chuck? I don't know that we need you to come up to give any discussion. Is there a motion?
I'll move to table.
I will second.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 3-0 to table. 10-3, Planning Department update, future land use plan status. Nora. Oh.
Is there even time to notice a public hearing? Okay.
Where's Karen?
We only got one piece of candy.
Is Karen out there with you? Oh, yeah, she's coming.
You need to share the hall. 26 paper.
Thank you.
Share.
We're sharing. Sharing is caring.
Sure.
Hey, pass that box around, why don't you? Okay, so we are here on at 10-3. Nora, thank you for joining us and giving us the status. And we got a planning commission on Thursday, so we got to get oriented.
Right, exactly. So since our joint work session with the Planning Commission and City Council, a number of things have been going on. Various pieces of city government have been meeting with the real estate community primarily to talk about their concern primarily with existing overnight accommodations and desire to not make them non-conforming and also to allow them to continue. So we've been having lots of discussions around that. Landmark has they modified the land use or the overlay ordinances for Grant County, and they're looking at 3 of them right now. And what they're looking to do is apply those 3 ordinances, those 3 overlays only to existing development right now. So it's their way of sort of legalizing their existing units. So that's important to them. As of this afternoon, the Planning Commission had not given direction that they were interested in allowing the overlay to be designated to any vacant property or property that's not developed. The Planning Commission, I don't know if they're still going, but they did have a meeting today, including a public hearing, which is why Landmark had to get those documents done. Their public hearing is before ours. So they've been working on that, and it'll be interesting to go back and listen to their Planning Commission meeting. I'm interested to hear what happened. And so since then, Landmark has been working on a potential overlay for us, given some of the comments that were given by everyone, which were great. We forwarded all your comments on the overlay and on the process to Landmark, and they've made some modifications. I just got those last night. I've made some preliminary comments, and I sent those out to Mark, that's what I've been doing over there. And I also sent you all the draft that I received last night from Landmark. So you all have that as well as the planning commissioners.
Do we have it right now?
I should have sent it today.
Chocolate.
I tried. I tried to send it today.
You did. You
Yeah.
did.
Okay.
It showed up.
Around 2 or 2:30, yeah.
Yeah.
Google Docs is not my forte, so I never quite know, but apparently it's working. So we have a planning commission workshop on Thursday, and I passed out a little draft outline, and I sent this to the planning commission actually last Friday. And so what I hope to gain from the planning commission meeting is to, first and foremost, talk about our existing overnight accommodations and various methods for making them legal as they move forward so they can continue. I think our recommendation as a staff is that we don't want to make them all non-conforming uses. So we need to look at another mechanism. And there are a number of ways you can do it. You can do an overlay like the county is doing. You could actually look at, from a zoning perspective, like a C2-OA, and actually identify those areas that have existing.
And Nora, can I just reiterate what you just said, but from a council and planning commission level, that at our joint meeting, we all, it was I think, consensus is the word I would use, that both council and planning commission are comfortable and would like to make sure that anyone currently doing overnight rentals has the permission to continue to do so and not be, and so that permission is protected,
Right.
that continue to be the case. And so we're looking to you to operationalize that.
Exactly.
And just to make sure the council all has the opportunity to agree on that united.
Well,
All I would add is that if they currently have a unit in that C2 zone, whether they're using it for an overnight rental or not, that they retain that right.
Correct.
Okay.
So built units in overnight rental zones that are or are not currently rentals, or only those that are currently?
If you have a unit in one of those, there's only a couple in town. It's basically Williams Way and Entrada.
Right.
Not all, I mean, some people live in those full-time and some of them rent them long-term. But I think that if we start making it a boondoggle about who currently is using it as an overnight rental and who is living in it, it's gonna.
I'm just going to add, I'm still digesting Chris's email, and it deals with a lot of the details and options here. So honestly, when we left the last meeting, there was discussion about, it seemed like the consensus of the Planning Commission was that they just wanted to ask folks to just get a license every year, and Chris gave us some feedback on that, but Chris sent us a long email, and I'm still working my way through. So I'm not comfortable, stating one thing or another because I have to finish reading.
Yeah, and I think we need to give you some more advice.
Yeah, we'll give you some more advice on that.
You're walking some fine lines by what you're trying to draw.
And with the Planning Commission, we'll talk about the various methods for trying to deal with that. I mean, hopefully they'll talk about it and give some direction. But I think we all agree that allowing those units, especially the projects that were built specifically to be nightly rentals, whether they have a current business license or not, allowing those to continue, as well as those that are operating, to allow them to continue.
So Norman, let me qualify what I think you mean. I think what you mean is you want them to continue as a permitted use and not a legally non-conforming use. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the big?
Necessarily permitted, but legal anyway.
So no growth option means no new permitted overnight rentals.
Somewhere else. In other words, if I understand, what you guys were talking about, and see if I got this right. In C2, you pick out, say, the Williams Way area, for example, a nice, tight, distinct geographic area, if you will, and Entrada, for example, which is another nice, tight, not necessarily physically connected, but well-defined area.
And Moab Springs.
Sorry?
Yeah, Moab Springs.
Moab Springs Ranch.
So a third area as well.
Yep.
Well, and there may be more, we can map them, which is what I have been trying to do, but we have our mapping guy is out of the office, so that's a little slower than I would have wanted. But I'm going to work with other engineering members to try to get some mapping done.
And you want to draw okay, so first of all, in those 3 areas that you just enumerated, the statement is made that virtually all of those are, well, I should ask you, what fraction of them are currently overnight rentals?
I don't know, but I think the projects, and the Planning Commission will talk about this more, I'm just telling you kind of where I'm coming from, is those projects were built specifically to be nightly rentals, and allowing that to be recognized as we move forward, I think is really important. The disadvantage of making them non-conforming is that they would have to come in every 6 months or once a year. They would actually have to rent it overnight in order to keep that use. And so a apartment that may be rented to anybody as a monthly rental may not be able, for a month, they may have to move out and they'd have to nightly rental it in order to retain the right to that use. Because non-conforming uses, the whole point of them is that eventually they will perhaps go away.
Right.
And in the meantime, they're in this kind of limbo. And I think the limbo also, if we require them to all to get licenses every single year, then that impacts their tax rates because all of a sudden they're commercial rather than residential. And they also have to do reporting on transit tax or the TRT. That's it.
I think it's simple to say, it's much more complicated than we think it's going to be to get.
All right, so
Yeah,
let me fast forward if I may, Nora. So I don't mind pushing overnight rentals owners into all these hoops if I thought their eventual convergence over to other uses had some sort of tangible, substantial benefit to the city. Okay, so if the property values take a hit, I don't care. Well, that's too harsh. I do care. I mean, I don't want to ding them unnecessarily, but I would still do it again if I thought there was a tangible benefit in the long run to the city, and that's kind of where I started off, and that's why I've been taking this hard position. So I want your professional opinion. I mean, some of my other council members have said, no way, it's never going to happen.
You mean then those uses transitioning?
Yeah, in other words, I think other council members have made the argument, and maybe you've emphasized that again here tonight by saying it, because Entrada and Williams Way were built to be overnight rentals, that the likelihood that they could ever, I mean, I visualize bike shops and small businesses and stuff like that in long-term rentals. So if you tell me that it's not going to happen no matter how many people let their licenses expire, then I'll give up on them.
I don't know whether it wouldn't stop them from redeveloping, the side or certain areas of it. They could still come in and do that. So I think we'll talk it through with the Planning Commission a little bit, and then those are policy decisions, obviously, that will have to be made. But I think we need to talk through the pros and the cons of each approach so that everybody understands what is going on and why some of the discussion about regulating through business licenses is probably going to result in an awful lot of confusion and discussion and fear as we move forward. And it might not be the best. I don't believe business licenses are the best way to regulate land use. I think zoning is. So I think there are some alternatives to look at those existing areas and make them legal somehow. And I don't know how today, but I think that there are some options that we want to explore with the Planning Commission.
But Nora, I mean, I'd like to say that Anybody who is operating a short-term rental has to have a business license.
Correct.
Period.
And it
So-
doesn't affect that
Right,
at all.
right.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean,
if
because
you're-
there has been a
definitely.
state change, and starting June 1st, we were requiring business license from every single person who runs a short-term
Right.
rental, and that has not changed. They are still having to,
Correct.
yes, okay.
And we now have all of their addresses, because we had to do an inventory for the state. So we now know where they all are, and we can map them, which is really a nice thing. But
so-
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. If they are operating as nightly rentals, they have to have a business license.
Okay.
So, so we're going to talk about the options, some of the options for those existing projects. And then I have, as I mentioned, we received some draft overlay language. And what we want to talk about is, do we want to adopt any kind of an overlay, just maybe big picture stuff, kind of the broadest sort of a stopgap measure that would at least give us something in terms of an overlay, understanding that we may want to refine that later. Or maybe you don't want to adopt an overlay at this point in time, but want to give direction as to what that should look like so that we can do further work on it. So those are kind of the options there. And then there's also been discussion about how the overlay is applied and whether it's a legislative, whether they have to go through 2 legislative steps to get an overlay designated on a property or just 1. So those, I'm going to talk to the Planning Commission a little bit about that. And then talk about next steps. I think it's important that we understand, and I mentioned this at our joint meeting, that we understand that we're trying to take a step toward a bigger process. And because of timing, I don't think any of us think we have the perfect overlay zone drafted. But what's sort of the minimum that we want to do now, with the understanding that there's a bunch of stuff to happen later. And ultimately, what I would like to see is whenever this moves forward and the city council takes some action, I would like you to, at the same time, give direction to staff to work on certain items so that it's evident that we're not intending to shut down nightly rentals forever. Or new nightly rentals forever. And maybe we will, but maybe we won't. And so to give that kind of, assurance that we're looking at other things to occur, so that we can talk about redevelopment, so that we can talk more about mixed use and performance criteria and form-based zoning and all those kinds of things. Those things will come, but we're not prepared to have. We're not going to have anything that's as detailed as you all want by the end of July.
So, in response to your earlier question, Mayor, I would like to provide an option for legalizing existing overnight accommodation projects as either as an overlay or as a subzone.
Yep.
Just to be clear about that. And then
that would secure existing overnight rentals
so that you don't
as
have,
permitted.
yes, other than not maintaining a business license as that tool.
Yeah.
Although they have to do that anyway, but it's not the land use
No,
tool.
but they can,
But that's not the
they
land
can
use tool.
drop the license, or ones that
Right.
are currently unlicensed can remain so until they choose
Correct.
to.
Need some Advil, Joel?
He's
Okay.
sighing because he's gone through the ringer of figuring out this business license thing. So is that a sigh of relief?
It's a legal sigh.
Okay, so so I just wanted to assert that since I hadn't spoken on it yet. And then as far as the less than perfect first stroke overlay zone, I know it's not going to be perfect, and I would like to engage in the dialogue about what we are able to adopt. And to do that, I need to get draft language before the afternoon of our council meeting.
I understand.
And maybe just have the council be guided. It's like, here are the top level issues and some options,
Yeah. And that's,
as opposed to like us just having to sort of generate it from this draft and self-facilitate our
but the-
discussion.
so the planning commission is going to deliberate on all these things, and they will ultimately have a public hearing and make a recommendation to you. And I think after the planning commission meeting on Thursday, we will probably come back to you at your next meeting and talk about some of these, talk about what the planning commission discussed and what they're thinking, and then you can give us further policy direction.
That sounds great. Thank you.
But I didn't have the language until yesterday, so
Yes,
I tried to get it to you just so you
That
knew what
sounds
was
good.
going on.
So go to planning commission, come back to us.
Right.
Back to planning commission, so that we're on track and that there are no surprises.
And there's a public hearing that's been scheduled, and it will be noticed on Thursday. It'll come out in the paper for a public hearing with the planning commission on the 27th of June. And then we'll do a notice for a public hearing with the city council on July 9th. So you understand the timing a little bit. So it gives us a meeting or two after that to.
Sounds good. So what more do you need from us before heading to, do you have any questions for us, points of clarification, before you head to planning commission?
I think not right now.
And are
I
you
need
open to meeting with any council members that want to
Absolutely,
process a little bit more before you go to planning commission?
Yeah. And I reviewed the draft language briefly today, and
Maybe next week is the better time to process.
yeah, because I think there are a lot of things that we talked about that have not been incorporated.
Yeah,
So-
that's fair.
But, I mean, I would like to point out what Kaylin said with, us creating a new zone, or, I mean, it felt like there was some commissioners that had a strong feeling in one way, and I'd hate for them to be working on something, and then it just comes to us, and we're like, no, we're not gonna do, I mean, then they have felt that in the past, so if we're clear now with that C2 zone, that might speed that section along a little bit.
Okay?
But, I mean, we can't really go much further without legal,
Yeah, it's important to,
yes.
yeah.
I'm taking notes.
Okay, well, I mean, I too feel that, like, I would appreciate doing something with the C2 zone. We've talked about that before, but if it's C2N, C2OA, C2, or that overlay of existing overnight accommodation uses, I would, yeah.
I want to say something, because whenever making a decision, I was always taught not to make a decision from a place that's fear-based. And it feels like there's been some fear thrown around about whether or not the state's going to come in and legislate how we are able to have local control over zoning. And what I want to say is that what we are trying to do is get organized so that we can have a breadth of opportunity for all business in our community. And I think it is important for us to send that message to our legislators when you guys are there next week and as we're talking to them, but that also we're not closing the door. And that's why the overlays, the putting work into thoughtful overlays for future overnight rental opportunities is very important, even if it takes some time, undefined time, to apply them. Does that make sense?
To that point, I would also, I mean, again, I'd really like to call number 5 balanced growth. Because
Yeah.
it's not no growth.
Yeah, and we're not really even saying number 5 anymore. I mean, what we're, I think we got direction from the two groups that you want to deal with existing and allow them to continue is, and even a solution for those projects that were always intended to be nightly rentals. That we need to establish some kind of an overlay, whether it's now or whether it's in 2 months, that's a really important piece.
And the good news about that overlay with respect to the legislators that we are going to talk with is that that is us protecting the rights of those particular businesses in continuing. So that's why that's, thank you, Kaylin, for suggesting that that's good.
Can I ask another question? Because I've just been curious. So that, I mean, we have unanimous, almost, support just to put a halt on hotels in particular.
Right.
How long, and so is it showing the mechanisms that we're working on? The criterion, is that what is going to allow us to legally not have new growth for 2 years or 3 years? I mean, I'm curious how that.
I mean, a lot of this is in flux, as I understand it, but you know, one of the tools would be to say, for a given lodge or a given zoning district, to just say that hotels and motels is no longer an approved use for that particular zone. That would have the effect of rendering every existing use in that zone of a hotel, motel type, a non-conforming use. That's the big concern that we've talked about, is saying, okay, maybe we don't want to do that.
But we've already said that we want to
want to
protect existing hotels to continue forevermore.
Okay, and so the question is, if you're not going to do that, what you may end up doing, and what I think is under consideration, is adopting an overlay zone that establishes more stringent criteria for new lodging developments that might take place. And it doesn't say you can't do it, it just says that there are going to be more stringent standards, maybe different requirements about how those developments are going to look, what's going to be included with them, the mix of uses, the form, you know, how those developments would be developed in the future. And it seems like all of that is to be considered by your planning commission. It's very much a moving target right now, as near as I can say.
But I mean, like, how long can you be working on those stringent qualifications and get a, I mean, not.
That's a great question.
Yeah, the risk is that we, I mean, you know, if we do not have new regulations in place on the expiration of the moratorium, the end of July, I believe, then that moratorium expires, and then land use applicants can come in and submit applications.
Well, I mean, should we say that we're only going to allow 10 by 10s? I mean,
You're walking into an unknown. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
I mean,
So the question you're asking is, how long can we go to a controlled growth option 5?
Balanced growth. Balanced growth.
Balanced growth,
Yes.
excuse me. Balanced growth option 5, before we have to actually adopt an overlay or permit some type of overnight rentals to come back into the fold?
Yes.
That's a great question.
And there's probably not,
I don't have the answer.
yeah,
for
I'm
you.
not sure
That's the
that there's
reality.
necessarily, I mean, and the state legislature is, I mean, somebody could sue us. So
Someone
that's
will sue
something that
us.
we'll, you know, we'll have to deal with and talk about. But the other, and as Emily mentioned, the state legislature has already tried once to take nightly rentals away from local control.
Yep.
So, and it's not necessarily, how do I put this and be politically correct? Sometimes the fact that we're moving forward and looking at the long-term health of Moab
Yes.
may not be a convincing argument to many legislators. And they, you know, sometimes. some
So,
of the
but just
things they
taking a
do
breath and
pop
getting
out.
organized might be a little better message.
Yes, exactly.
And a little better practice.
But that's not a legal argument either.
Well, the state
I'm
legislature
not,
doesn't
no,
have
it's
to
a
be
political,
legal argument.
it's a
No, I
political
know.
justification. And it's,
As long as we're acting in good faith and we're moving forward and we're actually doing what we say we're doing, I feel better about it. If we say we're doing what's in the best interest and we need to get this under control and we're going to do number 5, balanced growth, and then for 6 months we don't do anything and we don't show any effort that we're trying to adopt an overlay or we're trying to re-permit some uses, we're going to run into trouble.
and let's think, you know, a little bit more about shuttles and parking lots at hotels and how we can all work together to get organized. And let's, put that as part of the discussion.
And I think,
So-
real
and
quickly,
yeah.
I think I just want to state that it's not the city's position, nor is it our intent, nor do we want to take someone's property rights away. I mean, that's not what we're trying to do. We genuinely are trying to balance this cause and effect as we go forward and then get to a point where we can have sustained balanced growth so we can control the effect of what's happening. We are constantly balancing their landowner's use, private landowner's use, and the neighbor's private landowner use. And that's the balance that we're constantly trying to do. And that's what we're trying to find again. The use of overnight rentals is overrunning the private use of others, and they're complaining and they've had enough of it, and vice versa. And when we were meeting the other day, I made the comment to those who were there who have overnight rentals, if someone came in and they petitioned to build a hog farm next to your overnight rentals that would totally devastate your overnight rental use, I would tell them no, because that detrimental effect on your private property right would have too large of an impact on you, so I would impact their property right. And that's the balance we're trying to find. I don't want to infringe on anyone's property rights, but I have to balance everyone's and try and find that perfect mix that works for everyone.
And I'd just like to note that as we noticed when Brent Bateman came from the Property Rights Ombudsman's office, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a property right is and isn't, and the more we can do to educate people, yeah.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's your zoning power gives you the authority to decide what's in the best interests of the community at large. You have to make broad stroke legislative judgments about where certain land uses are appropriate and the extent of those and what requirements exist. And but in doing that, you're always going to be upsetting established expectations from people who already are there or people who were about to be there, who may want to develop something that you may not want to allow.
Yeah, and they're over at the Grand County Courthouse tonight.
Well, I mean,
Yes, they are, and I think they'll be here probably on Thursday.
At our planning commission.
Last comment, though, I just would like to say that I also don't want to set up false expectations for those who are for the number 5, and the reality is maybe we only have 6 months or we have a year, and we don't have 3 years. I mean, that needs to be very clear because it's going to come back to us that we're not doing a damn thing, and we're being overrun, and so that's where, it'd be communication.
About moving forward.
Yes.
Okay, so it is just about 9 o'clock, and I think that we have exhausted this topic.
Can I ask, one real quick thing? And that was just, is Chris going to be at the Planning Commission meeting, or do we need to have an attorney there? Yeah.
I did talk with Nora about that. I'm glad to be there if the city wants me there. And
or Joel,
I will be out of town, so I would ask Chris if he would attend.
On Thursday. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad to be there.
Thanks.
Can I ask one question just about actually moving this forward?
Yes.
So for developing the design standards, we can do that via looking at words on a page, or we could look at pictures and then have the words develop from sort of our sense of we like this, we don't like that, and that could be something that we engage the community in as well.
A visual preference survey.
Yes. Would you recommend that, or would you recommend, like, what
Sounds like you
It's
guys.
always a good course of action. When we get into kind of more detail,
Yeah.
sort of the next step, I think doing that would be a really good thing to do. I think we get valid input, and then the public understands kind of more what we're talking about when we talk about some of these standards.
Mm-hmm. And so I think we're probably headed that way eventually. So would it be too early to start talking about how you're going to, who's going to do that, or the process for procuring that?
I suppose we could.
Just as to show good faith to the folks upstate
Let's
and other
give
constituents.
Nora a little time to digest that suggestion and come back with us with maybe some ideas.
Yeah, we're
'Cause
pretty
that's
under the
kind of a
gun
big ask,
right now,
and
but
she's not
But I
hired an
agree that
assistant.
ultimately that's something that we should do.
Okay.
Okay. All right, moving on. 11, new business. Thank you, Nora.
Sure.
Proposed resolution number 34, 2019, amending fiscal year 2018 to 2019 annual budget request to send to a public hearing on June 25th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kaylin. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Tani. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. 11.2, proposed resolution number 35-2019, designating depositories for Moab City funds. Resolution number 35-2019, appointing the fund depositories for the city of Moab. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Do I need a-
Tawny, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Number 12, approval of bills against the city of Moab. Kalen.
I move to pay the bills in the amount of $14,160.38.
Thank you, Kalen.
Is that the smallest bill ever?
Yeah.
Is there a
Whoa.
second? Hold on.
I'll second.
Oh,
Thank you, Tawny. Discussion. Smallest bill ever?
Smallest bill ever. There was a stack that I did that was much bigger between after the last meeting, but it's not in the folder, so not sure what to tell you.
We'll get it there.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll approve it next time.
As a part of the prior 11-1, our budget cutoff is
Spending cutoff is tomorrow at 5.
tomorrow. And so it's coming fast and furious right now.
Just so you can see,
That's why it's coming.
here's where we're at so far.
Let's say it more evenly.
Right.
It's coming.
Right, well, I figured I had a big one coming, but this was the big one
The
in last
previous
2
big
weeks.
one.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get that information in there for you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Motion to adjourn?
Wait.
Yeah,
Do we want to go back into closed session?
I'm willing to.
Go back into closed session.
We would need a motion and a vote if you want to. And it's got to be
I
2/3.
don't know if anyone else is willing to. So I guess I can make a motion and see who votes on it. I move that we go into executive closed session for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Thank you, Ronnie. Is there a second?
And potential litigation.
And potential litigation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kalen. All those in favor?
Aye.
We want to discuss some of those things.
All
more.
all those in favor? Are you in favor? Okay.
Chris,
You are
we even
recused,
vote?
opposed?
We'd like to ask for
About going into
discussion on.
closed session?
They need to vote on whether or not we go into the session, and they can recuse themselves from.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's what I was.
Okay, yeah, to go into session, is that what we're
Yes.
voting? Yes, aye, please.
Okay. So we have 3.
Aye.
We have 5. Motion passes 5-0. Goodbye, everyone.
Let me do some things.
Can we have a brief bathroom break? Yeah.